Assalamualaikum. Shalom. Zohor Ravim Tovim. Khafirim Animevi Lachem Berkat Shalom Indonesia. Distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to the World Jewish Congress, in particular Mr. President and the Vice President, Deputy Secretary General, a good friend of mine, Mr. Maram Stern, for inviting me to this great conference. I feel that I'm really honored and delighted to be here to meet so many Jewish leaders and figures from all over the world. As a Muslim and president of Muhhamadiyah, which is the oldest and one of the largest Muslim organizations in Indonesia, but we claim to have about 35 million.
I apologize.
I view that it's important that our respective religions, Judaism, Islam, and together with Christianity in particular, to work together to solve the very problems of human civilization. As a revealed religions, I believe that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam maintain the same view on freedom of religion because God, the Creator, had created man with his intrinsic, fundamental, primordial right. That's the freedom of belief, whether to believe or not to believe in God, or freedom of religion, that's that human being has ultimate freedom to embrace or to choose a particular religion. Yet this a very basic human right is now challenged and threatened by fanaticisms and extremisms stem from communalistic orientation of believers. Coinciding with state intervention, government intervention in some cases, the violation against freedom of religious practices has become a serious threat to human civilization. When an obscure, outrageous video aimed at discrediting a religion's holiest of figures, for example, evoke another worldwide rage from brutal attacks, violent protests to peaceful condemnation, reminds us of similar previously highly publicized controversies over anti-Islam films and cartoons. It's imperative to ponder what has really happened in our globalized world, what a lesson we have truly learned from this incident, what we have been doing so far, or what we would greatly need to do to deal with such deadly incidents and disturbing tension. Similarly, I read, when the 14th Plenary Assembly of the World Jewish Congress to be held here in Budapest, group of people protest with no reasonable slogans, clearly shows that anti-Semitism is not yet died, but even resurged with more than a religious motive, but includes a political sentiment. What is at the heart of this rage and protest? Have our civilization been in clash? Is it another instance of clash of freedoms, particularly between freedom of speech and freedom of exercise religion? Or a clash between religion and liberty? Is it merely another misunderstanding caused by the difference in social values and fueled by certain political intention? Has been the world moving away from peace? If so, what can we do? In my personal opinion, the factors involved might be more complex than what we could imagine. This complexity is also reflected in the diverse opinion present in the debates over the film and also about the controversy. However, it might be quite clear that the recent case indicates that it is not only merely the freedom of expression itself which created the tension, rather extreme hate toward the religiously others, which hides behind the freedom of expression and behind any opposition to extreme freedom of expression. Hate and the hateful reaction to it, coupled by misunderstandings, have proven to be very destructive. This is one of the biggest threats toward freedom, mainly freedom of religion, but in fact also freedom of expression itself. At the international levels, there are a series of regulations consist of prohibition on religious intolerance, blasphemy, and the like. However, we should also recognize, analyze, and address the existing challenges, problems, and dilemma with regard to safeguarding fundamental rights and liberty, spanning from hate speech, hate crime, extreme ideology, violent extremism, gender discrimination, marginalization of minorities, to racism and ethnic discrimination. In addition, we should note that reconciling religion and freedom is not an easy task. It has even been the most difficult task most nations have faced. Failure to understand the language of religion and freedom could lead to the quantification of religion. People are trapped with numbers such as majority and minority. The perception of majority could lead to the superiority arrogance that cause alienation of minorities. Security and justice are still luxurious matters for minority groups elsewhere in the globe. Existence of minority is very frequently less counted because of generalization and efficiency in the decision-making process. Indeed, freedom of religion is an intrinsic and inherent right of human beings. It's a given and innate capacity and virtue from God, not from the state or any other parties. If Universal Declaration of Human Rights has provided a basis for freedom of religion, an International Covenant of Social and Political Rights has emphasized the very basis of freedom of religion as well as freedom of expression. Still, they cannot decrease values on that freedom or the given virtue from God. Legal instruments such as UN Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Intolerance and of Discrimination based on Religion or Belief, that's dated 1981, are good enough, but all should make them better known and abide by them. Law is easier to proclaim than to enforce. What are the restrictions which are permissible on the freedom to manifest religion or conscience? This restriction should be prescribed by law and should be aimed at protecting public safety, order, health, moral, fundamental rights and freedom of others, and also what about national security? I'm not going, I wrote 2 or 3 pages on the Islamic perspective on freedom of expression, but for sure, I think I learned is also in the Talmud and Torah, as well as in the Bible, that once again, freedom of religion and freedom of religious practices are given by God. Ladies and gentlemen, let me add one more factor on multiculturalism. We are now living in multicultural and multi-religious societies. No single society that's monolithic. All great cultural and religious traditions have to deal with plurality and diversity of cultures and religions. This plurality are both given and generated. As mentioned in many verses in the Holy Scriptures, God created mankind into tribes and races with different skin, colors, and languages. Plurality of religion is also a part of God's will. In Arabic term, sunnatullah, God's law on nature. Indeed, plurality is observable signs of evidence or evidence of God Almighty for intellectual, knowledgeable persons. Ladies and gentlemen, but we are facing now the threat and challenges of religious freedom and freedom of religious practices. According to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life findings, published in September 2012, government restriction on religion and social hostilities toward religion, that's including Sikhism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Baha'ism, Zoroastrianism, and others, Buddhism, indigenous religion, are rising in the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, Europe, but also in the United States. Government restriction, discriminatory laws, and policies against certain faith-based and non-faith-based individual and minority groups such as banning particular faith or sect, prohibiting voluntary conversion, limiting preaching, giving preferential treatment to religious group. For example, the year 2009 constitutional referendum in Switzerland banning the construction of minaret on mosques. Social hostilities, harassment of specific groups, individual and social groups that either act as the state apparatus, play not by the rule of law, or violate common ethics. For example, mob of sectarian violent harassment of attire for religious reasons and other religion-related intimidation or abuse. Propaganda or advocacy of religious, racial hatred that incite discrimination, hostility, or violence. Ladies and gentlemen, the complexity of today's world reality has brought about new issues and problems such as terrorism, violence, but not only group violence, but also state violence, and also capital violence, radicalism, extremism, blasphemy, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, conversion, justice, and equality. So this problem coincided with other issues of claim in certain national sphere, such as in Muslim country, of an Islamic state, Muslim majority country, Western country, a country with a religion is state religion, an official religion, a country with followers comprise the majority. So this is the coinciding of the issues. Another main issue today is how to ease tension between religious law, national law, and international law. How to address the claims of superiority or inferiority of religions when these are linked to the violation. This can be added with the still contentious issues of abortion, contraception, and circumcision, not only for the Jews but also for the Muslims. Thanks God, in Indonesia, there's no issue of circumcision, except some feminists supported the ban of circumcision to the girls. And now, what needs to be done? Number one, I propose a shared security, an agenda to be developed in order to enact freedom of religion and to develop cooperation among religions is to bring about collective consciousness on the importance of shared security. The notion of shared security implies that security is collective public good. The Kyoto Declaration highlights, for example, the collective responsibility of all people to meet our common need for security. The notion of shared security emphasizes that the security of the people, of human beings, should be at the center of attention. Similar to the notion of human security, shared security also requires a comprehensive understanding of security in terms of the metrics of human rights and needs. More importantly, shared security requires the involvement of all stakeholders to defend and advance human dignity. In this regard, religious tradition clearly provide the foundation for such undertaking. And number two, the interfaith dialogue. I think this is what have been done by many religious communities, but I need to suggest, through my involvement in so many interfaith dialogue, both in regional, international level, that we need a paradigm shift for interfaith dialogue. The dialogue so far are indeed 2 or 3 monologues. So we need new paradigm in the sense of we need the dialogical dialogue, which is a dialogue based on sincerity, openness, frankness for problem solving. I think there have been significant even between the Muslim, Christian, and Catholic, like the Catholic Muslim Forum at the Vatican, and the last one at Dead Sea, and also the Muslim dialogue with the Protestant at WJC, and I learned also from the media and brochures in this assembly, there have been also examples for dialogue between Muslim and the Jews. In this regard, religions clearly speak the language of peace. We should never surrender even though the challenge to our efforts to spread the message of peace are increasingly becoming more and more difficult. Indeed, proliferation of dialogues among civilizations seems have not completely removed the danger. The flurry of interfaith dialogue, both state-driven and society-driven, seems to have generated a little success in removing the prejudice, misconception, misunderstanding, hate and hatred among religious groups. And the third agenda I propose, that shared ethical values. Another agenda needs to be undertaken is to develop shared ethical values among people of different faiths. Religions may differ from each other, especially in theology, but at the same time, they share the same ethical values, especially with regard to human dignity, human liberty, and betterment of human's life. The Abrahamic religion, for example, maintained the notion of man's very mission as vicegerent of God on earth, and therefore man needs to achieve the high status of human being, that's to become the perfect man. Emphasizing the ethical dimension of religion will lead believers to have a meeting of mind, a common ground for coexistence, cohabitation, and cooperation. A believer in this perspective comes out with an ethical value that religion, I do believe our understanding of our respective religion is from God, but my personal opinion, not for God. From God, but for human being and humanity. By so doing, believers will capitalize similarities rather than differences between religion. Is it the time for believers to find a common word in order to face common enemies? But the common enemies are not the people of different faiths, but our common enemies, rather, it's the problem of human being and humanity, such as poverty, illiteracy, discrimination, injustice, environmental destruction, etc. So this is what we need to do together, because the reality clearly points to the imperative of not only doing more, but also doing it right. So much has been done to address the problem, but progresses have not been entirely satisfactory. However, it would be misleading also to claim that the ongoing initiative on interfaith dialogue among civilizations, are no more than pointless exercise. I do believe, and we need to believe in the power of dialogue. They expand the boundary of mutual understanding among people from different religious and civilizational backgrounds. Dialogue creates the imperative of enhanced interaction among people from different faiths. Dialogue have also opened up more opportunities for closer cooperation and communities to address problems of humanity and for the betterment of the society. Maybe the last point that have been touched upon very much on the role of the state and government. Thanks God, and we are lucky and fortunate in Indonesia as a majority Muslim country, about 88.2%. But unfortunately, we don't have significant number of the Jewish community, though I learned from the internet that there have been Jewish community in Indonesia, and up to now with only 2 synagogues in East Java and North Sulawesi. I may suggest for the Congress, the World Jewish Congress, to encourage building more synagogues and to increase the number of Jewish community in Indonesia. But the problem we are facing, that the role of the state, in the Indonesian context, that Indonesia is neither theocratic state, an Islamic state, and nor secular one, but the Pancasila state. Pancasila is the 5 principles, emphasizing the belief in the oneness of God and other things, but respect and protect religion. In our Constitution of the 1945, stipulated in one article that the state guarantee freedom of religion and give freedom of religious practices to the citizens to worship in according to his or her religion. So this is our modality for our national life. But sometimes, in the era of democracy, the political Islam, though they are not the mainstream, insist for legislation on the national law based on Islamic principles, and even insist for an Islamic state or for the Sharia state. But since the majority and the mainstream of the Muslim community, like my organization and other Islamic organizations, maintain a kind of that Islam is a religion of peace, and therefore we are not maintain a kind of formalistic approach to politics, but substantive approach to politics, and therefore there are no real problems as regard to freedom of religious practices, though there is a little bit problem with the building of house of worship, especially between create tension between the Muslim and the Christian. And my understanding as a religion of comparative studies on religion, I think the tension between Muslim, Christian, and maybe to some extent with the Jews, not because of the differences, but because of so many similarities. Because they are Abrahamic religion, derived from the same God, believe the same God, but because of these similarities, and sometimes we engage in differences, and we engage in tension between each other. And by this kind of dialogue between Muslim leaders, Jewish leaders, Christian leaders, I do hope the three monotheistic religions, the three Abrahamic religions will in the front line to promote peace in our world. Thank you. Toda Roba.